Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So I have completed the survey for Playtest Packet 5, and I'm going to share what I've written in that survey with you here, and I'm going to abbreviate it a fair amount to save time. But I do want to mention that some viewers have asked if I would provide a document of the comments I made in case they agree and just want to copy and paste what I wrote rather than write it all out again. So I'll do that. I'll pin a comment in the comments section that is going to have a link to a document. So if you want to just copy my responses, you're welcome to do so. But I do want to make it just super clear. I am not asking you to do so. If you have your own thoughts about this playtest, I want you to give them your own thoughts and opinions. But if you agree with what I said and it's just easier for you to cut and paste, by all means, you're welcome to do so. Now you can see the scores I gave to weapons and the weapon table on the screen, but here's the comments I ended up writing. The light weapon property provides an extra attack if you attack with, quote, a different light weapon, which means you don't need to use two hands at all. With the rules for equipping and stowing weapons, you can just attack with a light weapon and stow it, then equip and attack with a different weapon. It doesn't make sense that if I attack with a short sword, then put it away, then draw another short sword, I'd be able to attack more quickly than just holding a short sword. There doesn't seem to be any point to holding two weapons at once anymore. The survey then moved on to weapon mastery properties, and I said, I really like the idea of weapon mastery properties. There are 3 of them where there are some problems. Cleave isn't going to trigger very often, so I don't know why it would have a damage penalty. Flex is a bonus that's very small, and it also makes it so versatile weapons aren't versatile anymore. Topple will mean a saving throw needs to be rolled after every attack, and that slows down combats. I would like to see the requirement for cleave be eased, or the extra attack just be a regular attack. I'd like to see flex be more impactful, and not take away the versatile property of a weapon, like if it gave a +1 to armor class, or a +2 of holding the weapon with 2 hands. I'd like Topple to have a mechanic to determine if it works or not that doesn't require an additional roll. The survey then moved on to the new feats, and I discovered I didn't have a lot to say about the feats other than I was satisfied with them. So I didn't make any specific comments, I just said satisfied and moved on. With the Barbarian, I said, I'm very happy with the changes to Rage, the addition of Weapon Mastery, the new Primal Knowledge feature. I'm also happy that raging and reckless attacking with thrown weapons is now possible. I don't know why I'd want to play Barbarian past level 7 though. Brutal Critical isn't strong enough to be an 11th level feature. With the new Rage rules, Persistent Rage isn't really needed, and the Barbarian Capstone has been watered down and split into 2 features. For the new Berserker subclass, I actually related personal experience, so if you go to my Google Doc, it's not going to have that. It's just going to say, I really like the new Berserker subclass, because that's my opinion on it. Really like it. On to the new fighter, I said, overall, I was a big fan of the new fighter. I especially like the improvements to Indomitable, both at level 9 and 17. The naming of the weapon mastery features is weird. You start out a weapon master at level 1, then you're an expert at level 7, and then an adept at level 13. Isn't that backwards? Weapon expert doesn't seem like a substantial benefit. If I want a different mastery, I could just change weapons. Weapon adept is worded confusingly. When am I supposed to make the decision? Is it before the attack roll, after the roll but before I know if I hit, or after I know if I hit? Action Surge still being a short rest recovery feature seems out of step with the rest of the playtest. And as you can see, I just kind of went satisfied all the way down the champion, but what I said was, I appreciate the boosts given to the champion, but it is still one of the weakest fighter subclasses, even with the improvements. Survivor has a weird interaction with the new death saving throw rules, where as soon as you make your 3rd death saving throw, you qualify for Heroic Rally, and you start healing, and you're no longer unconscious. Not sure if that's intended, but if it is, it's not obvious to the player reading the feature. Moving on to the Sorcerer, I said, I like the rebalancing of metamagic, but the new twin spell doesn't seem very fun. Arcane Apotheosis is a serious balance issue, especially in a game with any downtime, unless Wish gets redesigned. My biggest disappointment with the new Sorcerer are the class exclusive spells. Arcane Eruption is the only one I'll likely ever cast. Sorcery Incarnate especially seems really weak. I want class-exclusive spells to be at least as good as non-exclusive spells. Otherwise, what's the point in having them? Alright, then on to metamagic. I said, I don't know why Seeking Spell costs 2 metamagic points. There's no good spells a sorcerer can cast that need an attack roll. I'm not sure Seeking Spell is even worth 1 sorcery point. I understand why Twin Spell needed to be reined in, but the new version seems unexciting. Then on the Draconic Sorcerer, I said, Draconic Exhalation is an interesting mechanic, and I might like this feature if Sorcerer's Burst was as good as other cantrips. But an exploding d6 is just 4.2 average damage, below other cantrips. Dragon Wings requires I cast Sorcery Incarnate, which is an absolutely terrible spell that requires my concentration, and casting Fly with a 3rd level spell is now better than this feature, providing faster flight for a longer duration with a lower level spell slot. Then my comments on the Sorcerer spells. I said Chaos Bolt is a spell I will never cast. The damage is too low for a spell requiring a spell slot. It's eventually outdamaged by cantrips, and this is on top of the damage type being unreliable. Sorcerer's Burst is a spell I will never cast. Rerolling 6s just gives Sorcerer's Burst an average 4.2 damage per d6. This makes Sorcerer's Burst the worst attack cantrip a sorcerer will have. For Sorcerer's Vitality, I said, this is a 3rd level spell, and for some reason it's worse than lower level healing spells. Other than removing the blinded or poison condition, I don't see why I'd ever want to cast this. Then for Arcane Eruption, I said, I like this spell, I'm looking forward to trying it out. This is the only Sorcerer exclusive spell I'm excited to try. And then for Sorcery Incarnate, I said, Sorcery Incarnate is a spell I will never cast. It is a high level spell. It requires concentration. It only lasts a minute, and the effects of the spell are underwhelming. Using 2 metamagic options on the same spell might be okay if I wasn't concentrating on Sorcery Incarnate already, but that excludes all my best spells from benefiting from this. Advantage on attack rolls of spells might be good if there were good attack roll spells. For the Warlock, I said, I like the switch from Pact Magic plus Mystic Arcanum to Spellcasting plus Mystic Arcanum. However, I don't want to have to use the majority of my invocations on Mystic Arcanum. Some version of Mystic Arcanum should just be built right into the Warlock. Hexmaster is a worthless feature. I do not want to concentrate on a 1st level Hex spell at 18th level, free or not. And these were my comments on the invocations. I said, Mystic Arcanum should be available at level 3 with a maximum spell level of 2. Otherwise, the vast majority of invocations need rebalancing. For the most part, they should be enhanced. Most invocations aren't worth taking. Why am I spending an invocation to read languages when I can read languages and understand spoken language with a 1st level ritual? Warlocks are giving up full spellcasting progression largely for invocations, so they should be better than sorcery points in metamagic. Mystic Arcanum seems like a must-have selection, and I am not a fan of must-have quote-unquote options. And then comments on the Fiend subclass. I said, I love the new Fiend Patron subclass. Every change seems like a good one. And that was it. And now the Warlock spells. So first it was Eldritch Blast, and I said, I am glad to see the scaling of Eldritch Blast is now tied to Warlock level. It gives me a reason to continue Warlock past level 2. Then the Hex spell. I said, Hex provides disadvantage on ability checks for an ability you choose. But what good is this? It used to be okay for grappling and shoving, but those aren't ability checks anymore. Hex should have a secondary effect that actually does something, and maybe that should scale with a higher level spell slot as well. Then, when it came to Pact Weapon, I said, I tried building a Pact of the Blade Warlock, and there doesn't seem to be any way to make weapon use even equivalent to just using Eldritch Blast. The weapon feats all increase the wrong ability scores, you don't get weapon mastery, and none of your invocations help. There's Life Drinker, which is a very small boost that is going to be overshadowed by the 3rd Eldritch Blast at level 11. You also don't qualify for fighting style feats. Then for Pact Familiar, I said, the actions you can take with the Familiar are restricted to dodge and attack with a reaction from the Warlock. This means I can't even have my Pact Familiar use its turn invisible action. Why have that on the stat block at all if they can never use it? And then for Book of Shadows, I said, I like the new Book of Shadows cantrip. I should mention there's some of these that I would have put some more comments on if there had been more characters allowed, because it did feel like I was just saying nasty stuff when there's lots of stuff I like, but I did want to point out the stuff I figured needed to be changed. Wizard is one of those examples. So what I ended up saying was, Scribe Spell is a wizard spell that only lets you scribe arcane spells. So you can't even copy Scribe Spell into a new spellbook. If a wizard doesn't have Scribe Spell prepared and their spellbook is destroyed, they can never make a new spellbook. A multi-class wizard can use Scribe Spell to copy spells they normally wouldn't be able to cast into their spellbook, and if they're rituals, even cast them. If they use Memorize Spell, they can even prepare spells they shouldn't be able to cast. Modify Spell is highly abusable. Having a spell, quote, only affect your allies or enemies has some really bad implications when applied to Fog Cloud, Web, Sleet Storm, Wall of Force, and a whole bunch more spells. It's completely broken. Given the ability to add the ritual tag to non-ritual spells is probably just a bad idea. The only limitation on Create Spell is a costly component, and the impact of that is going to vary too much from table to table. In some cases, a wizard list of prepared spells will all be enhanced with potentially multiple modifications, without any impact on spell levels. This seems really unbalanced. And as you can see with the Evoker, not particularly interesting responses. I just said satisfied all the way down. I said the change to Potent Cantrip is a positive one, though it still seems like an underwhelming feature, and I like giving Evokers a couple free evocation spells. Alright, and my comments on the wizard spells. So for Scribe Spell, I said this should be automatically prepared. Otherwise, if your spellbook is destroyed, you can never have a spellbook again. Also, you should not be able to scribe 3rd level arcane rituals with your Wizard 1 Cleric 4 because you can cast them. You should also be able to copy Scribe Spell, Memorize Spell, Modify Spell, and Create Spell with Scribe Spell, but they aren't arcane spells, so you can't. Then on to Memorize Spell, I said I like Memorize Spell, but there's a weird interaction with Scribe Spell. A Wizard 5 Cleric 12 could scribe a 9th level arcane spell into their spellbook, then use Memorize Spell to prepare it for casting. Then for Modify Spell, I said I like the idea of this spell, but as written, it's way too abusable. The most problematic part of this spell is the wording for targets. Having a fireball that only affects enemies is just fine. Having a fog cloud that only affects enemies is not fine. Having a wall of force that can only affect enemies is also not fine. I am concerned about adding ritual tags to non-ritual spells as well. And then Create Spell. I said, I like the idea of this spell, but as written, it's way too powerful. A fireball that does lightning damage and only affects enemies shouldn't be a 3rd level spell. If a group has a lot of wealth, the wizard can use Create Spell to enhance every spell they have, and with upcasting of Modify Spell, multiple enhancements on every spell without increasing spell levels. And with death saving throws, I said, this rule is clearer than the one in the last playtest document, but it still leaves unanswered questions. Does a healing kit do anything anymore? Does anything happen if you administer first aid to a creature with 0 hit points? And the final comments. So I said, there was quite a bit here. I love a lot of the ideas in this playtest document, but there are a number of them that need some reworking. The class exclusive spells for Sorcerer are really underwhelming, and I'm just not going to want to cast them. And since Sorcerers otherwise have the same spell list as Wizards and Warlocks, I think it's really important that the class exclusive stuff is worth casting. Scribe Spell, Modify Spell, and Create Spell all have issues that need to be redesigned. Scribe Spell should restrict the spells you can scribe to those you can cast, not spell slot advancement. Scribe Spell should always be prepared, and should allow scribing wizard tag spells. Modify Spell especially needs the part about targets redesigned to only apply to saving throws or something. Create Spell is too powerful. I like the idea of Modify Spell and Create Spell, and I would prefer a redesign to losing them altogether. I like the direction of the new Warlock, but Invocations also need more impact. Also, Mystic Arcanum is a must-have selection, and some version of it should be worked into the base class. Then, maybe an invocation for even more spellcasting focus. The secondary effect of the Hex spell should do more than provide disadvantage to an ability check. Hex Master is a poor capstone. Pact of the Blade should make weapons at least as good as Eldritch Blast, and Pact of the Chainmaster shouldn't restrict actions of the familiar to only dodge or attack. They can't even use their invisibility. I really like Weapon Mastery, and it's fun to play with, but Cleave, Flex, and Topple could be better. Cleave hardly ever comes up. Flex does too little and actually makes the versatile property useless, and Topple is clunky. I like the fighter changes, though the level 7 weapon expert feature should do something more, and the level 13 weapon adept feature needs to be more clear about when the decision to choose the mastery is made. It's also strange that you're a weapon master at level 1, an expert at level 7, and an adept at level 13. It sounds like you're getting worse, not better. I love everything about the new Barbarian up to level 7. After that, it seems like the features are either underwhelming or maybe not even necessary anymore. Other classes had their capstone moved to level 18 and in some cases made more powerful. But the Barbarian had their capstone split in half, now taking up 2 features, and both halves have been watered down. Both Path of the Berserker and Fiend Patron I thought were terrific, 2 of the best subclass treatments I've seen so far. Seeing all these nice goodies for barbarians and fighters reminds me how underwhelming the playtest rogue is. Please give the rogue weapon mastery. And that was pretty much all the characters I could use, and so that was the end of the survey for me. Took me apparently 2 hours and 15 minutes, because that's how long this video document originally was, and so I have cut it down significantly for you. But if you were to just copy and paste answers here, you could probably fill it out pretty quick. So if you haven't filled in your survey yet, I encourage you to do it, whether you're giving the same feedback as me or not. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.